Hello, this is the ER channel, Empires and Revolution. Much is said about the US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt is often portrayed as a genius leader who oversaw the ascent of American power to the highest levels. Others criticize him. He's held responsible for the unsatisfactory end to World War II, which led to the Soviet Union becoming the dominant power in Eurasia. On balance, the truth lies closer to the latter opinion. The reason that the outcome of World War II was so unsatisfactory had much to do with the nature of US politics and the fact that the most decisive year in the war was also an election year in America. The main military event of 1944 were the Allied land-ins in Normandy on the 6th of June. After much preparation and a break in the weather, the Allied armies were able to establish a beachhead. With total domination of the air and vast supplies of men and material, they were able to gradually push the Germans back in a hard-fought battle until in August they decisively defeated the German forces and broke the German front. Paris was liberated soon afterwards. At this point in the war, late August, there was little between the successful Allied armies and the heartland of Germany. But, as you can see on this map, the Allied advance soon started to slow down. The conventional explanation given for this is that the Allies were a victim of their own success. They had advanced so fast and so far that their supply lines were stretched, forcing them to stop short of the German border. This is a plausible and possibly even partly true reason. But there is also considerable evidence to suggest that if the Allies had kept pushing, there would have been almost nothing to stop them. By pausing in late September when they did, they gave the Germans an opportunity to reorganize their shattered armies and to reinforce them with new troops, new conscripts, and units from other parts of their still considerable empire. So, is the stretched lines of supply explanation really convincing? I think we should also look at another possible explanation for this halt in Allied operations. The fact that November 1944 also saw a US presidential election. This would present a more feasible reason for why the Allied armies mysteriously slowed down in September. Although pushing ahead was militarily the right decision and would have probably led to the collapse of Germany in 1944, it was also a more risky strategy and might have led to much higher casualties if things had gone wrong. So, with the election approaching, it is quite reasonable to imagine that Roosevelt would have sent out the signal to his generals through the Commander-in-Chief, Dwight Eisenhower, to take the foot off the pedal a little, not to be too gung-ho. The result of the 1944 election is well known. FDR won 25 million votes, or 53.4% of the vote. His Republican rival, Thomas E. Dewey, he won 22 million votes, about 46% of the vote. This was something of a landslide in the Electoral College, with Roosevelt winning all the big states. But this doesn't paint the full picture. If we look at the opinion polls at the time, we can see that the contest was much closer. Back in February or March, Roosevelt was far in the lead, but by May, the gap had greatly narrowed. At times, his lead over Dewey was only 1 percentage point, and right at the end of the campaign, the polls showed he was only 3 percentage points ahead. The fact is that Roosevelt was not as universally popular as many like to pretend. In this respect, he's not unlike Churchill, a much vaunted historical figure who was seen more ambiguously at the time. Also, the war was not as popular as many suppose. Roosevelt had essentially tricked the American people into joining the war, and the war had also led to a great increase in his power and a great centralization of the state, something that ran against the grain of American culture. It's not unreasonable to infer that if the war had gone badly, this could have greatly affected Roosevelt's chances of winning in November 1944. In the Pacific Campaign, American strategy was also relatively cautious. But in October, there was the Battle of Leyte Gulf. This is sometimes called the biggest naval battle in history. From the American point of view, this was supposed to be a rather low-risk landing on one of the Philippine Islands. This would have been valuable to Roosevelt. He could claim that he had led American forces back to the Philippines, from which they had been ousted by the Japanese in 1942. It was supposed to be a low-risk venture, but the Japanese took great pains to turn it into a higher-risk venture, committing most of the Imperial Navy to an operation that was designed to spring a surprise on the American invasion force. Luckily, the Americans had enough aircraft carriers, battleships, planes, intelligence, code breaking, and firepower to successfully defeat the Japanese attempt. But viewed in the light of the 1944 presidential elections, this was possibly not only a Japanese attempt to inflict a military defeat on America, but it might also have been a Japanese attempt to embarrass Roosevelt at the ballot box. But with the American Navy scoring a considerable victory, and with the US forces in Europe put on hold till after the election, Roosevelt was able to maintain his lead against Dewey and expand it, securing a fourth historic US presidential victory.